Have you ever had that feeling? When you had something, a responsibility that was given to you, and either because you didn't do something you should have, or maybe you did something you shouldn't have, you knew you'd blown it and you were in trouble? I remember there have been a few times in my life. I remember one particularly. I was about 12. And I was together with my best friend Rudy. My mom went out to do some errands. Rudy was a good kid. I was a good kid. Rudy and I together, not always good kids. I remember that it was around Easter because my mom had been blowing out eggshells. This is a craft I don't know if everybody knows about, but it's really kind of neat. You take a raw egg, and you take something very thin, and you poke a hole in the top, and you poke a hole in the bottom. My mom would use a nut pick, which was a really good tool for that, and then you would put it up against your mouth, and you would blow the yolk and the white out the other end, and there would still just be these two little holes. So if you didn't see the holes, it looks like a full egg, but it's light, and so you can do things with it that you wouldn't be able to do with a traditional hard-boiled Easter egg. It also has the advantage that all the perishable stuff is gone. So if you do an Easter egg hunt and somebody doesn't find it until early August, it's not a crisis. It's just a shell. It's not going to stink. Well, my mom taught Sunday school, and she'd made a bunch of these, and she was going to take them in. The kids were going to paint them. The kids were going to hang them from a little tree. And they were going to use that as a decoration in the church. Well, she was gone, and Rudy and I found these eggs. And we thought, that's really cool. You know what? These eggs look like spaceships. You may not have realized that eggs look like spaceships, but they do. Ask a 12-year-old boy. So before long, we were taking these spaceships and they were flying all over, and as sometimes happens, one of them crashed onto a planet and shattered into hundreds of pieces. And we thought, cool. And the next thing you knew, there was this fierce intergalactic battle going on, and ships were smashing into each other and slamming into asteroids. There were no survivors. It was exciting and it was fun, but as soon as the excitement kind of wore off, I looked around and I saw that there were broken eggshells all through the kitchen, and I thought, oh man, this is bad. And Rudy said, don't worry about it, we'll clean it all up. So we swept up all the counters and the floors, and we got all the bits of eggshell, and we threw them away. We even pulled the top trash away and put them in and put the top trash back on top so that nobody would see. See, we thought my mom was really dumb. Mothers are not dumb. Mothers are like Sherlock Holmes. No detail gets past them. But we figured maybe if we replace the empty eggshells, maybe she won't notice. So we took some more eggs out, and we did a nice job. We blew out the eggs and washed them off and put them on the counter. I sat down on the couch and started watching reruns of Gilligan's Island or something, and I heard my mom come in, and I thought, okay, it's going to be okay. And then I heard, Matthew, come here. And that's how I know about the feeling. If you've had that feeling, then you can be sympathetic with me, and maybe you can be sympathetic with the servant in the parable. He was given a responsibility. The master said, look, I own all this, but I'm going somewhere, so servant, guess what? You're in charge. And you get the benefits of being in charge. You can sleep in the house, you can eat the food, you can enjoy yourself, and you can tell the other servants what to do. Make sure they do their jobs efficiently. Make sure they're taken care of. And the servant probably did a pretty good job for a while. Then he started thinking, well, This guy's been gone a while. I mean, I'm the one doing all the work. It's almost like it's really my place, not his place. Why don't I do what I want to do? And so he started bossing the other servants around and bullying them and beating them if they didn't do what he wanted to. Got some of his friends over and they all got drunk. They danced on the furniture until the table legs broke off. I'm embellishing a bit. But you kind of get the point. I mean, if you've ever had someone looking after something of yours, or if you've ever looked after someone's and something went horribly wrong, you know what I'm talking about. It's easy. There's a human tendency, I think, to take on that kind of responsibility where you're caring for something that really belongs to someone else and start thinking, hey, it really is mine. It's not going to hurt anything if I treat it as mine. Who's going to know? And that's why stewardship is a difficult job. It's a hard job. You know where that word comes from, stewardship? I looked this up. It comes from an Old English. It comes from stig and werd. And werd is it's an Old English word that means a person who's put in charge of something. Makes sense. And we get our words ward and warden from it. A warden is somebody who's put over usually a group of prisoners, but they're a caretaker. And a stig was a wooden structure, a building. It could be a house, or it could be a cattle barn, or it could be a sheep pen. It was an enclosure where you keep track of something, people, animals, and they live there. Specifically, in English, stig was the place where you put the pigs. It's come down into our language as sty. So stig became sty, and werd became ward, and we have sty ward, pig keeper, or steward. If the English had written the Bible, it probably would have been a little different, because when you think about what a steward, a pig keeper does, well, they feed the pigs. They make sure they're healthy. They make sure they get water. They make sure they get out and get exercise when they need to, because in those days it was all free range. They make sure that predators don't get in there. They make sure that thieves don't get in there. In fact, if this sounds familiar, what the pig keeper does is very much what the Good Shepherd does. And if the story of the Bible had taken place in England instead of Israel, we might very well have the good pig keeper instead of the Good Shepherd. Of course, it didn't work out because it took place in Israel, and sheep are kosher and pigs not so much. But the word stewardship is still there, and I think it's helpful to remember where it comes from, because it's like the shepherd. You're caring for something, but it's really not yours. You're doing something for the person who really owns that. And that's the meaning of being a steward. It's tricky for us as Americans because we're used to owning things. If we put work into something, if we buy a piece of land and you build a house on it and you develop it, and that's mine. If I work hard and earn money and pay good money for a place to live, or for animals, or for crops, or for whatever, that's mine. It belongs to me and no one else, and no one has any kind of claim to it. If I want to use it to do some good for somebody else in the world, that's my business. But if I want to just ignore the rest of the world and say this is only for me, I can do that too, because I own it. And that's very different than the view the people of the Bible had. For them, we don't own anything. And you can kind of tell this when you read the laws in the Bible. You know how there's a day a week that we're supposed to take off, not work? A Sabbath day? That's the one we break the most in this country, I think. Nobody closes on Sunday anymore. It's not practical. And but the law is there because the law says there's something that's sometimes greater than being practical. And that is taking care. And that means that everyone must have a time of rest, a time of rejuvenation, a time of renewal. And that's not just people. The law, if you read it more closely, says, don't work your animals on the Sabbath day. Even the animals have the right to rest and to be renewed. And if you go a little farther, there's a Sabbath year. We don't know as much about this one, but every seventh year, the land, the earth, gets to rest according to the Old Testament laws. It lies fallow. This is something, years later, people came up with the idea that you rotate the crops to make sure the nutrients are replenished. And that's basically what this is. The earth gets to take a year off because the earth also has rights. It doesn't belong to us. It's its own thing. It belongs to God. We belong to God. It's given into our care, into our charge, but it's not an arbitrary thing. We get that with responsibilities. Responsibilities are also for what the earth can produce. There's a law that's called the gleaning law. When you harvest the crop, there's always some that falls down. And the practical impulse is to say, hey, I can maximize my profits if I just go through with better equipment and make sure we get every last bit of grain from the harvest. But God says, no, the earth is mine. And the earth is there to provide for all my people. Not just for you who are stewards of this piece of earth, but for everyone. And so you leave the gleaning, remembering that it doesn't really belong to you in the first place. And you leave enough so that people can take it and gather it and live. It's not just for you. It's not just for your friends and family. It's not even just for the people who work for you, but for the poor, for the widows, for the orphans, for the strangers, for the foreigners. Stewardship means we work the earth, but we have to work it in the way that God wants us to work it, for the good of everyone. And if you start saying, this is mine, and it's there for my benefit, and I don't have to help anyone else, and I don't have to care for it and protect it, you've really kind of forgotten whose it is. Whose eggshells are they? Not mine. Whose pigs are they? Not mine. They're all God's pigs. I'm just the steward. So as we look at the earth on this day, let's remember, we are the stewards. We get to enjoy the good earth, we get to breathe the good air, we get to walk in the good ocean, we get to feel the earth beneath our feet, we get to benefit from all the good things that come from the earth. But never forget, the earth is the Lord's and all that dwell in it. And if we want to be good servants, let's do it with care and with love.